Elijah stood frozen, the weight of the threat sinking in. This wasn't just about his invention. It was about a larger force that had deemed his work dangerous. But dangerous for whom? Who would want to keep the world from discovering the potential of wireless electricity? That was when Elijah realized the truth. His invention would eliminate the monopolies that controlled oil, gas, and power. It would change the world in a way that would undermine those who held the reins of power. And that was something they could never allow. Despite the terror that gripped him, Elijah refused to back down. He couldn't give up on what he had created. He couldn't allow the powers that be to steal this opportunity from the world. So, he went underground, setting up a new lab in an abandoned factory on the outskirts of the city. It was a small, dusty building, far from the prying eyes of the corporate world, but it was his sanctuary. Every night, he worked in silence, reconstructing his invention piece by piece from memory. He was meticulous, every movement fueled by the knowledge that his invention could change everything. But the shadows were never far behind. Every time Elijah stepped outside, he felt a constant sense of being watched. A car parked across the street, a man in a dark suit standing at the corner. His phone crackled with static every time he made a call. The world had become a prison. And then, one fateful evening, as Elijah made his way home, he noticed a car tailing him. At first, he thought it was just paranoia, but the car followed him too closely. He turned into an alleyway, hoping to lose them, but as he emerged onto the next street, two men were waiting. Before he could react, they seized him, shoving him into the back seat of a black sedan. The silence in the car was suffocating. A deep voice spoke from the front seat. "Mr. Carter, you've been warned once. Consider this your final warning." Elijah's fists clenched. His heart raced with fury. "You can threaten me all you want, but I won't stop. The world deserves to see this." The man in the front seat let out a cold chuckle. "The world only sees what we allow it to see." Hours passed. When the car finally dropped him off on the outskirts of town, Elijah stumbled out, his body aching, but his spirit unbroken. He had survived, but it was clear that his battle wasn't just about invention. It was about survival and justice. The months that followed were filled with frustration and failure. Elijah reached out to journalists, scientists, anyone who might be willing to listen. But no one would take him seriously. Doors were slammed in his face. News outlets refused to print his findings. His friends, once his closest allies, began to distance themselves. Fear had taken hold of the world, and Elijah was now a pariah, an outcast. Then, one night, his worst fears came true. Elijah arrived at his secret lab, only to find it destroyed. His machine, his research, his life's work, gone. The lab was in ruins, reduced to rubble. There was no warning this time, no notes, just emptiness. A silence that seemed louder than any threat. Standing in the wreckage, Elijah felt the weight of his losses. He had sacrificed everything for this: his safety, his relationships, his peace of mind. And now it felt like it had all been for nothing. But even as the darkness closed in, he refused to accept defeat. The knowledge couldn't be erased. He had memorized every detail, every calculation. He could start over. And if they silenced him, someone else would continue what he had started. Decades later, strange patents began to surface, designs strikingly similar to Elijah's lost work. Whispers spread that the powerful elite had stolen his research and were using it to further their hidden agendas. But Elijah's name, his legacy? It was as if he had never existed. The history books had forgotten him. Somewhere, in the shadows of forgotten history, there were others like Elijah, brilliant minds whose discoveries were buried under the weight of greed and control. How many more lives like his were erased? How many innovations had been stolen, hidden away from the world for the sake of power? The truth always has a way of resurfacing, but sometimes the people who uncover it never do. And that brings us to the end of this story. Thank you for joining us on this unforgettable journey, We hope you enjoyed the story. If you did, don't forget to like the video and share it with your friends. Be sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell so you can stay updated with more fascinating stories. See you in the next video. Take care. Nobody knew his name. He had created an invention that could change the world, but history erased him. Why? What was the real reason behind his disappearance? When the truth finally came out, it revealed a dark secret that had been hidden for decades. A secret so big, it could shake the foundations of power itself. It was a cold morning in 1954. The streets of Chicago were covered in a thin layer of frost, and the air carried the sharp bite of winter. Inside a dimly lit basement laboratory, Elijah Carter had been working tirelessly for days, his fingers smudged with ink and grease. His eyes, bloodshot from lack of sleep, scanned the blueprints spread across the cluttered wooden desk. Scattered notes, scribbled equations, and wires twisting like tangled vines painted a picture of pure genius at work. But this wasn't just a breakthrough. This was the beginning of a revolution. Elijah's invention wasn't just an idea. It was a spark of potential, a game changer that could rewrite the rules of energy forever. Today was the day. His device, a machine capable of transmitting electricity wirelessly, was finally ready for its first major test. This wasn't science fiction. It was real. He could feel the electric pulse in the air as he prepared his machine for its debut. But what he didn't realize was that today would be the moment that not only changed his life, but would make him the target of forces much larger than he could ever imagine. With a quiet breath of anticipation, Elijah flipped the switch. The machine hummed to life, its energy flowing through the air like a silent storm. And then, as if by magic, a light bulb, placed several feet away from the device, with no visible connection, flickered on. It glowed softly, casting a light that illuminated Elijah's face, the pride and exhaustion visible in his eyes. He had done it. It worked. It was the birth of something bigger than himself, something that could have transformed humanity's relationship with energy. But Elijah had no idea what this success would cost him. Excitement rushed through his veins as he packed his documents and blueprints. His mind was racing, calculating the next steps. His invention was brilliant, but it needed protection. The world couldn't be trusted to embrace such a monumental discovery without resistance. The next logical step was securing a patent. That way, his work would be protected, and he could control its future. But, as Elijah soon found out, securing a patent was no simple task. The establishment would not easily accept such an unorthodox breakthrough. A week later, Elijah found himself standing in the lobby of Maxwell Industries, a corporation that claimed to support innovation and new ideas. He handed over his documents, his heart pounding with hope and trepidation. He was ready for his life to change. Or so he thought. Days turned into weeks, and still no word came from Maxwell Industries. Elijah's anxiety began to grow, his optimism fading with each unanswered letter. Finally, a letter arrived, stamped with the company's official seal. It was rejection. The letter stated that his invention was impractical and impossible. The words stung, but Elijah's disbelief only fueled his determination. He had seen it work. He knew the truth. They had to be wrong. Confusion turned to frustration. Elijah resubmitted his application, only to be met with silence. No explanations, no answers. And then, one evening, as Elijah returned to his lab, he found the door smashed open. Papers were scattered across the floor, and the smell of burnt paper hung thick in the air. His machine, his notes, everything he had worked so hard for, gone. The lab was nothing more than a wrecked shell of its former self. Panic gripped him, his mind racing. Who would do this? Who even knew about his work? It wasn't just a break-in, it was something far more sinister. Then, he noticed something that sent a chill down his spine. Scrawled across the wall in dark ink were the words, "Stop now, or we will erase you too."